होता ये है कि as you proceed further in your career, your technical skills are very important. They still remain important, but then your soft skills actually become more important. When I was in 8th grade, I actually failed my 8th grade math exam. ठीक है?
Right.
So स्कूल वालों ने क्या किया कि उन्होंने कहा कि अच्छा आपने मैथ एग्जाम फेल कर दिया 8th grade का, so you can't actually study math in your O levels, which was a very weird decision if you want to stick around in the school. Then there was like other things that came to, like there's this Dijkstra's shortest path algorithm, a concept like how do you create an algorithm that can find the shortest path to a specific location,
Yes,
which
exactly.
when you think of it in an academic concept, तो आप कहते हो हाँ इसको मैं कहाँ apply करूँ?
आप 2011 में graduate हुए, right?
बिल्कुल.
And in the same year, you managed to get an internship in Procter and Gamble.
Yep.
So tell us about that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So in these like in bigger tech companies, data is a very it is beyond the scale of anything that we can imagine. At least before that, I thought, I'm working in an ad tech platform. I've seen billions of rows of data. I said like, so when Uber joined here, it was maybe 100 times that, and my mind was blown.
Some people have this misconception when they're coming into data science. They think that this is a very narrowed down or a very specialized field. But the reality is that data science itself is a whole different world, which includes computer vision, NLP. जिस तरह अभी आप बात कर रहे थे, BI, data analysis, सारा interlinked है और काफी sub domains निकलती हैं. Somebody that's just starting out, how does he navigate his way through all these sub domains, and how does he find his path? Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Odas Podcast, where we are bridging the gap between industry and academia. So starting off with the introduction, the guest we have today, he has done his bachelor's in business administration from the Lahore School of Economics, followed by master's in information system from the University of Melbourne. At the moment, he's working as the global BI manager at Uber in the United States of America. So without further ado, from the United States of America, please welcome Mr. Saad Durrani.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
How are you?
I'm great. Pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot for organizing this.
Thank you so much for giving us your precious time.
No, all good.
So, how is your day going? Although I think it's just started, but how is it going?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. This is it's not early in the morning, but I know it's late in the night for you guys. So I appreciate you picking a time that works. Bas abhi uthe, and I'm just having my coffee. You'll see me drinking it the whole time. So
that's great. So साथ भाई हम बिल्कुल शुरू से स्टार्ट करेंगे, ठीक है?
Yep.
आपकी शायद यूनिवर्सिटी से भी पहले या यूनिवर्सिटी लाइफ से हम स्टार्ट करें. तो before university, what mindset did you have? मतलब you were always tech savvy, yeah, it grew eventually.
No, I always had a major interest in just generally tech stuff. I think my background basically starts where हमारे घर के अंदर, for those who were around back then, आपको याद होगा कि Intel की Pentium technologies होती थी, Pentium 1, Pentium 2
exactly.
होते थे. So हमारे घर में एक पुराना, we had an older computer that wasn't even a Pentium 1, it was a 486. So nobody really paid it much attention, which meant that I was free to dive into it, pick apart the parts, and completely destroy it in and out, and then fix it all over again. So I remember doing this early on in my life, and that fascination sort of continued. उसके बाद से didn't really have an opportunity to pursue formal education, at least in Pakistan, within the tech overall space. Like an interest तो शुरू से था ही था उसके ऊपर.
जनरली होता है ना कि जो BBA में जाते हैं, क्योंकि आपने BBA किया from the Lahore School of Economics, right?
Yep.
तो उनका माइंडसेट थोड़ा सा डिफरेंट होता है. यूजुअली they're coming from a stable background, तो इसलिए वो BBA की तरफ जाते हैं, या उनको टेक्निकल नॉलेज हासिल करने का इतना कोई शौक होता नहीं है. तो आपका भी यही सिनेरियो था, या it was a bit different, right?
Yeah, I have an interesting sort of backstory in that I think I always had the interest, but then due to certain reasons in my academic career, I could not actually pursue it. So if I were to actually go back in the story, it's very interesting. I'm doing stuff in the data science and a very math-heavy domain at this point. Because when I was in 8th grade, I actually failed my 8th grade math exam. Okay?
Right.
So स्कूल वालों ने क्या किया कि उन्होंने कहा कि अच्छा आपने मैथ एग्जाम फेल कर दिया 8th grade का, so you can't actually study math in your O levels, which was a very weird decision if you want to stick around in the school. तो मैंने भी कहा ठीक है बल्ले बल्ले मैथ मुझे आती नहीं है, you know, you're gonna not making study math in my O levels. नहीं करते. So 3 years I didn't study O level math. उसकी वजह से that actually academically closed a lot of like technical doors for me at the time. Because आपने
ठीक है.
math नहीं पढ़ी होती, so you can't get into engineering. If you can't get into engineering, you can't go to your आपके जो जी की लम्स वगैरह के इस तरह की स्कूलों के वो बिल्कुल ही दस वगैरह का दरवाजा ही बंद हो जाता है. तो फिर I think I was like more doing BBA at that time purely because it was the best opportunity that I had given the things that I had available. But I'm pretty sure like going back, like I would definitely opt more for the engineering side. I think that was more core to me. The BBA that I did, I also purely did because वही था कि यार उस पॉइंट से लेके अब तक जरा मैथ का खौफ आ गया था ज़हन में क्योंकि समझ आती नहीं थी और पढ़ाई की नहीं थी तो मैंने कहा यार ये ख़त्म करना है इसको. तो फिर my undergrad, my BBA, I did a majors in finance, but then I opted for a maths and stats minor. Purely because I was like यार अब जबरदस्ती फिर मैथ पढ़नी पड़ेगी. So somehow I went from literally
हटाना था.
उसको जरा खत्म करना था. So I went straight from like not understanding कि यार basic algebra क्या होती है तो सीधी वो linear algebra और quadratic वो मतलब वो जो आपकी जो उसकी इतना undergrad की math और stats होती है उसके अंदर तो सीधा उसमें छलांग मारी. Obviously it was a struggle to survive at that point, but वही है कि you know the stuff that you do makes you stronger. So you know.
To be honest, this is something really interesting because everybody fears calculus, even me
Yep.
and my friends. Because I think इसकी एक वजह ये भी है कि जो calculus पढ़ाई जाती है, it's not really practical. वो आपको एक theory का angle दे रहे होते हैं, but वही चीज़ जब आप practically देखते हो, तो it's more understandable.
हाँ उसकी I think mode of instruction से भी थोड़ा बहुत फर्क पड़ता है और मेरी एक one thing I understand very later on in life कि यार पढ़ाई करने का तरीका होता है कदर तो मुझे पढ़ाई करने का तरीका नहीं आता था earlier on in life if you talk about O levels या फिर pre undergrad type के years के ऊपर. So essentially what that would mean was I would think at कि यार okay staring at a book for 5 hours a day पढ़ाई होगी without actually ingesting the knowledge and actually understanding कि इसको apply कैसे करना है. Similarly math को पढ़ते वक्त भी it was essentially कि यार अच्छा यार ये formula है इनको रट्टे लगा लो but like eventually you sort of realize कि math is sort of like a game with a very defined set of rules. तो वो अगर आपको rules समझ में आ जाते हैं so then आपकी math automatically काफी अच्छी हो सकती है if you treat it that way. If you treat it as यार ये एक bracket भूल गया तो मुझे अब 4 लाइनें जाके पीछे वो करना पड़ेगा so that's one way to think about it. But I definitely think once I shifted that mindset around it, it definitely became a lot more easier. Or the other rule that I adopted was that do not progress to a more complicated step until के वो जो basics हैं वो बिल्कुल पूरे अंदर बाहर.
This is very important, I think. ये तो हर चीज में apply होता है.
हर चीज में वो एक general rule शुरू मैथ से ही हुआ पर उसके बाद sort of helped out with everything else. And the best thing it helped out was to break down really complex things, which is essentially what you end up doing when you're doing data science or business intelligence. When you're dealing with large sets of data, numbers, and overall आपने करना होता है analysis, is that you really need to learn how to break things down. तो वो अगर आपका शुरू से आदत बनी हुई है, then you're going to be in a really good spot. I know what a lot of people do, I think culturally, within Pakistan as well, कि यार लोगों को डर होता है कि वो they don't want to appear stupid in front of other people. So they will not ask questions. I work with a lot of I've worked with Pakistan में काफी काम भी किया और उसके बाद आगे जाके अभी भी I'm continuing to work with a lot of people in Pakistan. So वो end पे होता ये है कि I sometimes get this feeling कि यार वो कह देते हैं कि समझ में आ गई है, but then eventually when you dive into it समझ नहीं आई होती. So essentially you also have to take that fear away or that like ego away and actually say यार नहीं समझ नहीं आई. I want to be stuck here till I figure this out and then I'm going to proceed to the next thing.
Exactly. चले आपने BBA में तो एडमिशन ले लिया, but once you started BBA, what was university like for you? मतलब did you focus on technical skills? Yeah, did you focus on social skills?
Yeah, I focused mostly on social skills. That was another time in my life. I was very interested in a bunch of things. Obviously, leadership का था शौक शुरू से था. I come from like a family where like that sort of stuff is actually very highly coveted. तो उसको जो pursue करने की opportunities मिली तो ज़रूर की जाके. Much like yourself, I started a society focused on entrepreneurship within the university. And also I was serving as the vice president for the photography society at that time. जो LSE की थी हमने खड़ी की थी. उसके अलावा डिबेट्स वगैरह के अंदर जरा शौक चढ़ा के यार उधर घुसते हैं थोड़ी देर के लिए. So did effectively I can fully say that a well-rounded university experience, education पे भी काफी focus था. Overall the opportunities that a good university provides you in terms of extracurriculars and CV building, उस पे भी काफी focus था. So it was a overall great experience. हाँ, LSE में गर्मी बढ़ी है और LSE में आपको टी-शर्ट्स नहीं पहनने देते. That's my only two complaints with
टी-शर्ट्स एयर में भी नहीं पहनने देते.
ये हमारे इंशाल्लाह हमारी एकेडेमिया वालों को जरा अकल समझ आए कि कपड़ों से वो नहीं होने लग जाता. वो और वजूहात हैं. वो we're still hung up on our क्या कहते हैं British colonial sort of times के जी
Right.
साहब ने जो किए. But apart from that, yeah, it was overall fantastic. I think the opportunities that I got in university, and this is something that you don't respect at the time. जब आप पढ़ रहे होते हो ना यूनिवर्सिटी के अंदर, आपको कैफे के खाने से लेके बास्केटबॉल कोर्ट की हालत से लेके लाइक ये कि यार चलना कितना पड़ता है, फलाना उस्ताद कितना है, ये टीए ने तंग किया हुआ है, ये आप you're lost in all of this. But once you and those are very valid concerns because that's your life at the time. But when you get out of it, one of the things that I really appreciated about my university care, I went straight from there, LSE से अपने masters के अंदर, actually had worked a little bit there, with the World Bank and with QRMD for a little bit. And when I went into my masters, so now I had moved from LSE, Law School of Economics, which is a very BBA education is very different, and moved to now one of the Australia's best university, which is the University of Melbourne. का जो engineering school है, which is their toughest school का information systems का program. But somehow LSE had equipped me with the skill set, and Pakistani education in general had equipped me with the skill set कि यार I knew how to cope with all that. So it's a very different sort of scale. It's a completely आपको वही है ना कि आप bachelor से shift कर रहे हो from a very non-technical field, finance heavy, math heavy, into a very technical field, very मतलब programming भी है उसके अंदर. There's a lot of overall systems analysis, technical skills, so that would normally be very difficult. But that is where you actually appreciate कि यार अच्छा नहीं, the fact that we did a research paper as part of our undergrad, those are some of the skills that I've still used to this day. कि यार basic analysis वगैरह कैसे करना है, आपने regression वगैरह जो थी, ये सारी चीजें, वो the fundamentals start there, and you don't really appreciate it कि यार क्यों कर रहे हैं, हम क्या कर रहे हैं. But जब इस्तेमाल होते हैं आगे जाके, तो then you can really sort of stand to appreciate कि यार okay, now I know how this stuff is happening here.
राइट. एक क्वेश्चन साथ ही मैंने आगे पूछना था पॉडकास्ट में, बट सिंस उस तरह की बात हो रही है तो आई आस्क इट ओवर हियर. साथ में कुछ मतलब आप क्या कहते हैं, कुछ लोग जो हैं वो टेक्निकल डिग्री में बैचलर्स करते हैं और फिर बिजनेस की किसी डिग्री में मास्टर्स करते हैं, तो हाउ डू यू लुक एट दैट?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid way to go around as well. I think what ends up happening in a lot of so I work with a lot of or like community वगैरह में. I'm in San Francisco right now, so there's definitely a lot of startup founders generally, or just generally people who work in tech. And one thing that you do definitely see there's this concept of amplifying your impact. So what that means is within the tech sphere is yaar, one person, one programmer आप ले लो, one data scientist ले लो, one business intelligence analyst, कोई भी आप ले लो, working on one project will only be able to provide a 1x sort of impact as far as that person is concerned. ठीक है? क्योंकि वो एक ही चीज पे काम कर सकता है वक्त पे. तो पूरा जो टेक का कॉन्सेप्ट बना हुआ है वो है स्केलिंग के ऊपर. So how do you scale that up? So essentially, the way you scale that up is then you get into a leadership position, you manage a team of 5 people, for instance, and then technically your knowledge and your experience, you are then amplifying that 5x.
Exactly.
So, hota ye hai ki as you proceed further in your career, your technical skills are very important. They still remain important, but then your soft skills actually become more important because leadership ke andar, it's not about कि यार इस बंदे को सबसे ज्यादा पता है इस चीज के बारे में. It becomes more कि यार how can this person manage a team, lead a team, make sure that we have the right tools and principles in place to ensure that everybody's doing the right thing and the best thing. So that is how it is then seen later on. What I would argue in this though, कि यार if you are acquiring a technical degree, then make sure you have some technical experience before you apply for like an MBA. Because that then really allows you to actually capitalize and understand कि यार क्या चीजें इस्तेमाल हो रही हैं in the real world. So that is one thing I would recommend. Straight technical से MBA जाना जो है, I think is, I mean, look, I'm not going to say I know. I've seen a lot of people with very different sort of background scenarios, and whatever life presents to them. That is an option. I'm not saying it's the worst thing. You can really maximize that opportunity by, in my opinion, getting a couple of years of experience, then doing your MBA. Because the other thing that I joke around this with my friends is कि जब आप BBA जैसे जो भी आप undergrad degree करते हो, for a lot of people it ends up being the field that they don't want to work the rest of their lives in. So they do a 4-year undergrad and then they're like, I don't want to do this anymore. So that also then, that working afterwards also provides you with a bit of an opportunity. Okay, if you figure out what you actually want to do, which is like, at least the case for me. That's when I actually figured out इसमें करना है काम.
Right. So Saad, you've mentioned that you've taken part in some research papers during your university days, which were relevant to data science and AI. Am I right?
So in my master's, yes, it was more data
not
science.
During your bachelor's?
No, bachelor's mein to yaad dekho, that was 2011. This field was very nascent, not gonna lie.
Right.
Or at least our understanding of Pakistan ke andar to ye bachelor stats ke had tak hi tha. Uski maybe somebody had said कि यार R सीख लो या ऐसे कुछ कर लो, but it wasn't really that much of a thing. We would effectively run our research papers through I forget the name of those softwares. Stata out there, I think there's like MATLAB or a couple of these. Yeah. I understand. Well, basically you just dump your data in and it just runs the statistical analysis for you, and then you're like, अच्छा अब मैं इसको क्या करूँ? ये R square की value आ गई है, इसका मैंने चार डालना क्या करना? So effectively it turns into a bit of that. So we did, obviously, as part of my undergrad thesis, I think mine was basically on, and that was during that time into 2007-8. They're similar to our time right now. I think it was like the country was suffering from a forex sort of crisis, or generally like our जो normal हमारे cyclical crises होते रहते हैं. So my interest was what's stopping FDI or foreign direct investment from coming into the country. So that was what my my thesis was about. I just analyzed Pakistan and a bunch of other neighboring countries within the Asia Pacific region, and I was like, what is the sort of determinants of what causes FDI to come into the country, and how do we stand in terms of like other countries around us?
Right. So what basically drove your interest towards data science from BBA to data science, and when in your journey?
Yeah, so this was mostly when I focused on, there's two things that happened. After I graduated, I worked for QRMD for a year. वहाँ ज़रा business analysis का काम था. फिर उसके बाद I got an opportunity to work for the World Bank. When I was working for the World Bank, what I would realize, a lot of I was working with the governance support program, and our projects were mostly in KP, Fata, Balochistan. But one thing I noticed was that as a BBA individual, you're good at following up with people, chasing up people to do the thing that needs to be done, but you don't have the skill set to do it yourself. Like कोई hard skill नहीं होता आपके पास.
Basically, people management, communication, soft skills होती हैं.
Soft skills होती हैं, लेकिन आप exactly you have no confidence in कि यार ये मैंने बैठ के analysis की है तो इसकी basis वगैरह. I mean, obviously to a certain extent, हाँ, but I would see a lot more like other people come in, very technical people, and they would like completely do the things that I would struggle with, and it would take me a lot of time and very quickly. So that's when I basically started thinking about it. How do I pick it up? So then you pick up a little bit, you strengthen some of your base skills. वो Excel वगैरह के अंदर आप थोड़ा सा जाके थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा उसमें घुसने की कोशिश करते हो. उसके बाद when I actually started my master's program, उसके ऊपर फिर I sort of figured out कि वहाँ there were a lot of opportunities to get into data, and I specifically chose to focus on spatial data. अच्छा, spatial data क्या होता है कि it focuses a bit on, I don't know if you've heard of Esri or ArcGIS, yes, there's basically satellite mapped data available. You have maps, contours of various locations on the planet, elevation maps, वगैरह. So when I started, did a couple of courses, there were some interesting problems to solve, which was, can we figure out effectively कि यार इस area को कितनी, I don't know, how much sunlight will X area get based on elevation, ये पहाड़ block कर रहा है इसको, और इसकी general geolocation की basis के ऊपर. So that's what I found really interesting. Then there was like other, things that came to, like there's this Dijkstra's shortest path algorithm, a concept like how do you create an algorithm that can find the shortest path to a specific location?
Yes,
Which when you
exactly.
think of it in an academic concept, तो आप कहते हो हाँ इसको मैं कहाँ apply करूँगा? But
Hmm.
then you sort of realize कि यार आप Google Maps अब use करते हो to get to point A to point B, तो वो ऐसे ही similar algorithms और problems वगैरह को solve कर रही है.
Exactly. Discrete maths में आपको बस पढ़ा देते हैं. But now you're talking about
Exactly.
the practical implementations.
So that is when you actually realize कि हाँ इसका कुछ हो सकता है. So then one of my projects that I worked on back then was effectively like a similar sort of exercise where we did one thing that I did was effectively map out an area and try. Our hypothesis was कि यार जिस तरह we were in Melbourne कि यार अगर आपके घर के करीब एक train station है या कोई public transport system है, so then कितनी vicinity के अंदर is there a correlation between that happening and your real estate value going up, for instance?
Right.
Okay. So that's what like one of the projects that we wanted to do was figure out okay, what actually causes real estate, like what are these geographical markers of things, etc., that cause one area to be a higher priced one versus another. So that's when we like, figured out all this data, map, उसको plot slot करवा के उनको फिर code showed run किया उसके ऊपर. And then we came up to our analysis saying, yeah, okay, this vicinity actually, is 10% higher versus this, and this is the overall radius का fall off के इस point से आगे जाके आपको, you'll find your property starts decreasing, but if you have a station that's within, let's say, 100 meters or 200 or whatever, then your price is relatively higher. So that's the sort of stuff, interesting stuff that we did, or like just trying to figure out, okay, how do we create a, like point A to point B route planning के अंदर the shortest path to do that, like basic sort of stuff that you sort of do in this. उधर शौक था. फिर क्या हुआ कि what I was also really interested in doing over there was just generally, as I said, undergrad के अंदर I'd founded the entrepreneurship society, so वो वाला कीड़ा stayed with me.
Right.
So they have a lot of hackathons over there. So there were like a fair few that we participated in one, but one that actually stood out was a NASA organized a space hackathon, in which they basically said, okay, this is all our data, and we focus on climate, this, that, the other. This is all these data sets available. Just build anything at all. You have 2 days and just go crazy. So we formed a team. It was myself and a couple of other people. We Melbourne University says it, and we ended up creating a ML model. So I ended up creating the model. Somebody else worked on the front end. Somebody else worked on the pitch. So that's how it normally happens in the hackathon. And the way that the ML model worked was basically we took in location data from all these various different weather locations across the world. And then we created a model that would just spit out the likelihood of your flight getting delayed based on weather events. Okay? So we just packaged that as a product and basically said, okay, cool. This is a fantastic product that, busy businessmen can subscribe to, whereby, people who are constantly on flights day in, day out, they just, get a ping from the service saying, hey, your flight is likely to be delayed based on these weather events. So घर बैठो या फिर और family के साथ time enjoy करो या फिर, call the airline and ask them if that's the case actually, but don't actually go to the airport and sit around and get delayed. So
Nice.
we're giving you hours of your life back. So that was our overall pitch. We won an award at that competition. There were various different awards. So that was like, the sort of stuff that actually made me think further and further, this is fantastic. Must continue going into this, yeah.
और जो आपने मास्टर्स करने का भी सोचा उसकी भी प्राइमरी रीजन ये थी कि you wanted to improve your technical skills on top of your soft skills that you were already having.
Yep. So that's why the program that I chose was it's with the Information Systems program at the Melbourne University. It was at the time it was ranked overall number 14th globally, so it was a pretty good program. But more specifically, the reason why I chose this one versus some of the other was that were available across the world was purely because this had a good mix of a technical and non-technical skill set. So a lot of the other information systems programs focus are provided or taught by the business schools of the university, which makes it a very different sort of curriculum. My recommendation is if you do want to get into this, and people who are like non-technical and your listeners, they want to get into this, and they do have that sort of technical inclination, find a program that's offered by the engineering schools, because वो आपको सही तरीके से technical knowledge सिखा सकेंगे उसके ऊपर जाके. या फिर if you're looking at specifically data science, because even back then the data science field was still like, there weren't a lot of programs over there. I remember when I graduated, I think uske baad unhone koi program uska add kiya, and I was like pretty angry at that point, because I was like, yaar, kar dete 2 saal pehle to tab wo kar lete. But those programs are also good if they're maintained or like they're taught by the dedicated like technical engineering-ish sort of facilities. The business school people, those are valid programs too, but they'll focus a lot more on the business application, which ends up again being a lot more soft skills, okay, versus the hard skills. In this field, I would say specifically the hard skills matter a lot more. Soft skills are something that you can pick up with time, but they're not specifically things that you can that you should be forefront of your education program.
Right, that makes sense. So I was going through your LinkedIn profile for this podcast, or up 2011 में graduate हुए, right?
बिल्कुल.
And in the same year, you managed to get an internship in Procter and Gamble.
Yep.
So tell us about that.
As you do. I think 2011 के अंदर, like, we were all hustling to sort of figure out कि करना क्या है जिंदगी के साथ. I don't know, you can tell me if the situation in Pakistan has changed much, but it was effectively always the same when we were growing up, which was like there were only a handful of employers that would pay well and were decent, and there was obviously a lot of competition. So when P&G came to the thing, वो एक concept होता है which has helped me in life more recently than other times. It's like, it's about creating your own luck, where a lot of people will take themselves out of the situation or occasion because they think उनका कोई chance नहीं है कोई चीज करने का, but they don't even try. They're like, यार बहुत मुश्किल है, हमें किसने लेना है, like, and constantly this is like, I come this across so many people, especially unfortunately Pakistan के अंदर, because हमारा culture भी थोड़ा सा ना लोगों पे वो they like putting people down as a demotivating किस्म का है. So people will automatically take themselves out of the equation without even putting in the effort. So I think I remember this a little bit because somebody just told us कि यार हम इसी तरह फिर रहे थे उसके ऊपर within the campus, and somebody said कि यार ये PNG वाले आए हुए हैं, टेस्ट ले रहे हैं, तो जाके दे दो. And पहला ख्याल तो उस दिन यही आया पहले कि यार कोई चक्कर ही नहीं है, मतलब मैं कहाँ से पास करूँगा ये वाला टेस्ट. But फिर भी चले गए और दे दिया, and somehow we ended up, I remember it was me and one of my really other close friends and a couple of other people from the class, and somehow we ended up, we gave the test, and I still remember that during that time we were also working on, there was this IBA का business idea competition था Invent के नाम से, which was like a global competition that they had held. Global का मतलब है कि Pakistan-wide competition that they had held. It was like a 6-month very grueling sort of thing where आपको business idea से pitch करना था, और I remember कि तब cash prize 5 lakh का था, so you can imagine 5 lakh back then would have been a decent amount of money. So we were definitely like, very like we were doing all that too. And the reason why I say this was because I remember कि one of our ideas was to actually get bone meal and blood meal, which is like leftover waste products, and turn that into organic fertilizer from. तो हम लाहौर के अंदर जो उनका एक मेन I think butcher station है, मुझे exact location भूल गई है. I think I completely forget किधर था, but I do remember that it was the foulest smelling place imaginable. Like you could get knocked out by the smell. We were there doing research, so we were just going them and asking them कि यार आपकी overall output कितनी है, ताकि we can figure that into our business model. And I remember back then, like my friends, like ये सारे शोशा सारा छूट गए और results release हो गया PNG वालों के. तो हमने भी जाके, जो हम तब उस वक्त तो में फोन पे डेटा तो इतना नहीं होता था, तो हमने भी जाके अपने ईमेल एड्रेसेस के पासवर्ड दिए किसी और के, यार चेक करो हमारा आया है नहीं आया. तो मेरे दोस्त का आ गया, who was with me at the time, and फिर मेरा नहीं आया हुआ था. फिर तकरीबन मैं बड़ा डिप्रेस था. फिर 15 मिनट बाद ईमेल रिफ्रेश हुई तो मेरा भी आ गया. So I was like super happy.
Nice.
So that was just the first stage, and then they did like 6 other rounds of interviews, and then we did that like which was obviously very grueling as well. So I remember total unka batch was like over like 5,000 people applied. There were like maybe 20 interns that actually made it in. And then went to Karachi. It was a fantastic experience. Obviously, first time that you get into proper corporate life. PNG in itself is a very very cutthroat environment, but a very good place where if you want to learn how to be exceptional, it's a very good place to start off with. So I would recommend to your listeners, if you want to actually get good skills that will help you for the rest of your life, find a job that's relatively tougher at the start, because वो वाली आदतें आपको पूरी जिंदगी रह जाती हैं. If your job is easier at the start, बहुत chill है, laid back है, boss वगैरह भी मतलब chill है, then वो नुकसान ही होगा कि
आदत खराब हो जाती है फिर. स्टार्ट आपका जब मुश्किल होता है तो.
Exactly. और आदत खराब होने का डाउनसाइड थोड़ा सा ये होता है कि फिर वो बाद में जाके, because as life progresses naturally,
we don't adapt.
Yeah, you don't adapt, and then more complications arise. Not complications per se, but आपका focus भी shift हो जाता है eventually. You get married, you have kids, etc., etc. So then you find less and less time for doing that. So it's earlier on in life, and some people understand, some employers actually understand and abuse that as well, which I don't recommend. But there needs to be a healthy mix of it needs to make you think. And once you start thinking, and once you start putting yourselves in situations which are genuinely difficult, they will cause you to grow. Or वो growth ही है जिसके पीछे what we're seeking. One thing I will say is that there is this very definite mindset that I've seen in a lot of people, and it's not just for Pakistanis, कि यार अच्छा जी मैंने अपना undergrad कर लिया तो बस उसके बाद education खत्म. Like I don't need to learn anymore. Like the amount of people that I meet that are still using concepts and principles that they learned 5, 10, 8, 12 years ago is crazy. दुनिया कहाँ से कहाँ shift हो गई है, but they haven't really focused on updating their knowledge per se. So that is something that at least within this field, which is data science, business intelligence, that is the first single-handed way to ensure that you will not find yourself in a position with a job very quickly. Because this is आपको constantly अपने knowledge भी update रखनी पड़ती है, and you have to constantly keep on doing that. So bringing that back to the point of PNG and internships and stuff, those are the sort of skill sets that I learned and acquired back then, which have been helping me throughout my life.
All right, so now let's talk about Uber. How did you join Uber? और Australia से आप US पे भी shift हो गए Uber join करते हुए. So talk about that, please.
So Uber was again an opportunity that came very randomly. This is where it boils down to that thing about creating luck and just making sure that you're doing everything that you can. And फिर आगे अल्लाह में हाथ में क्या होता है नहीं होता. In this situation, I just remember that I was still working in my previous role before this, and I saw this job opening within Uber, and I applied for it. And then they actually sent me a link to their code testing platform. So the way that it normally happens for technical roles is that they will normally send you some sort of test up front.
But that job was relevant to data science?
That was the lead data scientist position.
Right.
For Uber advertising.
So you managed to gain enough experience before that.
So उसके ऊपर I was yeah. So before that, I had experience working specifically. So when I completed my master's program, I specifically focused on getting data analytics specific roles. So I worked in Dentsu, which is a massive marketing company group, which has holdings all across the world. And I was focusing on programmatic trading in there. तो वहाँ थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा आपको एक practical experience मिलने लग जाता है of how to actually use these things in a corporate sort of setting. Then I moved to a company called Index Exchange, which is within the ad tech space, which is the advertising technology space. Actually works to ensure that websites are paid, free websites that you go to and you see ads. So this is a sort of technology that works behind the scenes to ensure that you are, websites actually know what sort of ads to target and what sort of people to show what sort of ads. So I helped set up their APAC analytics team at that time, and I worked there for about a couple of more years, like 2-3 साल उधर काम किया. So by the time I joined Uber, I had about like 4 or 5 years, maybe more, of post master's experience, and it was specifically very focused on model building, analytics, etc. So yeah, and ended up giving that exam. I remember I was still working on my role, and I got really tired of working on this one problem that was literally burning my mind. So मैंने कहा यार चलो ये SQL का इन्होंने कोड का टेस्ट भेजा हुआ है तो चलो ये दे देते हैं अभी मतलब in lunch break में. You know, sometimes you're working on a different type of problem and you're like, I want to just clear my mind working on something else. So I did that and alhamdulillah किसी तरीके से पास कर लिया वो जाके. फिर उनका interview process शुरू होता है, and then within the interview process for companies like these, a lot of times they will provide you with like case study, like they'll do your normal interviews, technical interviews, but a lot of times they'll also provide you with a case study. Which I think is a fantastic way to actually for you to assess what sort of work you're going to be doing, and for the company to actually assess, you know, what your performance is going to be in that sort of role. So case study D will be clear. Okay, then I ended up joining the position, and the role over there was essentially the thing with Uber Eats is within Australia at the time is as you can imagine, a food panda example, okay, there's going to be some really high tier accounts like your KFCs and your McDonald's. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have some mid-market sort of accounts, which are, let's say, aapke Rahat Bakery type ke lo, is tarah ke, which are like, you know, they're prevalent, but they're not as prevalent as your McDonald's and KFCs. And then you get to the lowest tier in terms of volume or in terms of actual size, which is your, what we call the small to medium business. And more think your, aapke kareeb koi tandoor hoega, you know, like smaller shops per se, single owners sort of thing. In terms of volume, they are the highest in the sense that sabse zyada wahi hai. So they constitute about 50% of the overall business in terms of size. But the problem then becomes that you can't have dedicated account managers for each specific coca per se.
Exactly.
So the problem that we were trying to solve is how do we get them to actually improve their revenue, and how do we get them to improve their overall metrics and KPIs that contribute to better revenue, better health, but without having dedicated account teams. How can we do this through sheer we call scaled sales? So how could we do this through just effective code and like using platforms, mass marketing sort of thing? So a lot of the work that was being done over there, what I was doing was essentially boils down to like, you know, when you have millions of billions of rows worth of data, if you have hundreds of thousands of different variables that could be contributing to a restaurant's performance, my job was to figure out kya kaun se. So this is where you can deploy like aapki unsupervised learning models, for instance, or nearest neighbor type algorithms to actually figure out these are the sort of 6 different metrics that actually matter. Everything else is noise. And
so
once you figure out
sets jab aapko Uber provide karta hai, and you take those data sets and provide the analysis, do the analysis and all of that, right?
So in these like in bigger tech companies, data is a very it is beyond the scale of anything that we can imagine. At least before that, I thought, I'm working in an ad tech platform. You know, I've seen billions of rows of data. I said like, so when Uber joined here, it was maybe 100 times that, and my mind was blown. Ye bhi hota hai. So you then start reaching other problems, which you've never reached before, which is essentially how do I optimize my code? How do I make sure that my server ke upar zyada time nahi laga raha iske upar? How do I make sure that I can get this result which is within the constraints of like having, let's say, it can't be more than 1 million rows worth of data, for instance, because बाकी चीजें crash करने लग जाती हैं, लैपटॉप बैठ जाता है. तो इस तरह के मसले भी आपको solve करने पड़ जाते हैं. But again, that's a very, very, very good learning experience and all that.
काम आप primarily किस software पे करते हैं? कौन सी language, Python या R?
So mera experience is I studied a little bit of R. I found it a bit of an older technology. Python, the beauty of Python is the sheer amount of libraries that are available, and it's a very live platform where people are contributing to that ecosystem. It's growing day in, day out. They're creating abstractions and libraries that sit on top of it, which makes sure you know, like you can use it in a lot of things, and specifically within the AI space, काफी उसकी practical applications है. So Python, SQL, and then from visualization perspective, could be any tool possible. You know, that skill set, once you learn one platform, it's very transferable. With Tableau, BI, Looker Studio, all these things, Power BI, they end up becoming very similar. Even I would say, it's funny because we went to a data conference once, and somebody asked, what is the most used tool by analysts across the world? And a lot of people said Python, somebody R, somebody was like Snowflake, ends up the answer is Excel. And that is true for us too. Like most of my work, regardless of however you want to say it, when you interface a bit more with the business side, which is the case right now, a lot of it is going to be Excel or Google Sheets. So I would recommend make sure that's an easier like sort of hurdle before you get into programming per se.
So you would
अपनी
recommend
Excel
everybody to basically learn Excel to the
in
best
and
of their
out,
ability.
because आप जितने मर्जी technical हो जाओ, आपका जो the people that you're going to be interfacing with are not going to be at that level of technicality. You can show
Exactly.
them as many high dimensionality charts as you want, fancy graphs. वो उनकी आंखें अगर glaze over कर रही होंगी, उनको समझ नहीं आ रही होगी बात, so then you haven't done your role as a effective analyst or data scientist. You haven't communicated a complicated idea in an easy way.
Makes sense.
So yeah, so then it's basically like, Excel helps you provide very basic ideas as to how rows, columns, or basic data sets sort of can start and how you can interact with them. फिर आप pivoting से शुरू करते हो, फिर आप उसको ले जाते हो आगे, like whatever आपने आगे जाके करना है. So I would still say it's a very important skill set. Then followed by SQL, then followed by Python, depending on which area you're interacting with. And in Python के अंदर there's enough knowledge available all over, so I don't need to repeat it. But like effectively, आपको pandas सीखना है. There's like I was in another workshop the other day, and there's something new that came out. It's called Polars as well, which is effectively like pandas, but has like 10 times the performance in terms of speed. So very good for analyzing even bigger data sets. And then whatever you want to use for like visualization, Seaborn, whatever. In most instances, you will not be, at least in most corporate instances, you might not actually be creating. I mean, I don't want to say this because bade fark kisam ke kaam hote, but I haven't had an opportunity to create like dashboards just using hardcore programming. Normally, what ends up happening is that I will analyze and synthesize the data. I will come up with like whatever models, etc. I need to run, and then use some base sort of visualizations to just affirm to myself. But effectively, when pe aapko dalna kisi slide pe hi padta hai. So your presentation skills and all those other things also really matter. Yeah.
So BI basically means that you're more on the data analysis side, or data science relevant आप इतने नहीं है, for example implementing the models and predicting and everything.
यार वो देखो, वो भी दो तीन चीजें होती हैं इसके ऊपर. So हाँ, my current role is more on the analysis side. My previous role when I was in Australia was more on the data science side. इसके ऊपर भी again the skill set sort of overlaps fair enough, where I would say that I'm still using that skill set about 50% of the time. So I wouldn't really completely discard it. But in that you are correct, where data scientists ka zyada kaam is more technical, where it comes to like more focusing on the models themselves. Within applied or practical sort of data science field ke andar, you won't be actually going in and fine-tuning the models as much. And I mean, you'll be fine-tuning them, but you won't be actually like writing research papers on them. That is a very academic field. Okay.
Right.
So आपको एक practical level of usage समझ में आ जानी चाहिए कि यार मैं कौन सा मॉडल किस situation में apply कर सकता हूँ. ठीक है. What sort of parameters I need to actually feed into this model, how clean the data needs to be to actually get to this point. So that is a sort of skill set that would be very useful in terms of a more practical sort of domain. And then, for people who don't know, I would recommend looking at Kaggle. It's a big sort of like community with regards to data science. Then there's, if you want to step into AI, तो फिर उसकी अपनी Hugging Face है, and there's a LangChain is one other tool that you could potentially use, but that's another field altogether. But yeah, it's effectively boils down to like getting the data in and then predicting your models, and then depending on your use cases, you could apply them to either. So for instance, right now, within a more analytical sphere, I could still use them to predict revenue for a specific type of vendor. It'll still be using the same models. It probably won't be as production heavy as a model that basically for every tap that you do on the app, वो आपको पूरा overall आपको analyze करके बताता है कि इस बंदे की likelihood of conversion for this product कितनी है, etc., which are again practical uses. So it's a whole different domain altogether that you can get into.
Right. So some people have this misconception when they're coming into data science. They think that this is a very narrowed down or a very specialized field. But जबकि reality ये है कि data science itself is a whole different world, which includes computer vision, NLP. जिस तरह अभी आप बात कर रहे थे, BI, data analysis, सारा interlinked है और काफी sub domains निकलती हैं. Somebody that's just starting out, how does he navigate his way through all these sub domains, and how does he find his path?
Yeah, I would say for anybody who's starting out, the best way to do it is to, this is what people normally do, is normally you do like a Python, etc. course. And that gives you some basic skill sets. Okay, what is the language, syntax, kaise hai, how do I create a function, this, that, the other. And then you basically find some way to analyze some basic data sets. Now, what I would recommend for a lot of people to do is actually find a problem that they want to solve. Okay? So either you work with a company and you solve their problems day in, day out. As I said, one of the ones that I did was, trying to figure out within all these hundreds of thousands of variables that exist, which are the ones that actually matter. The way you score regression, multilinear regression, trying to figure out what is the इनमें से R squared सबसे ज़्यादा किस model type का बनता है. Or you could effectively find a problem that you think exists out there and you want to contribute to it. So for instance, one of the problems that I'm trying to solve on the side is which is an OCR/NLP problem, which is कि पाकिस्तानी दुकानों के ऊपर जो billboards लगे होते हैं उनसे हम data extract करके how can I take a photo of it? Can I extract all that data to basically automatically figure out इसमें नाम क्या है, phone number क्या है, or based on the name and other information that exists on the billboard, can I sort of identify what type of business is this?
So that's like computer vision वाली side पे, right?
Yeah, computer vision की side पे आ जाता है. Another problem that I'm solving is effectively how do we use AI models to create a fantastic customer experience? How do I, when you come to me and say, okay, I want to find, the best tourist spots in, I don't know, Turkey, Istanbul. So is that something that can be done very quickly, where something on your behalf can go and can analyze 10 different things based on the variables that it knows about you and your likes and your dislikes and preferences, and not give you generic results, which you could get from Google, but like very custom tailored results that it knows based on you. So once you have that skill set, it's all about like trying to figure out something that you are passionate about, especially as a student, and then going in and building it. And then the third thing that's really important, this will help you find a job, is how do you build your own portfolio when it comes to these things?
Yeah, so, I think this is very important.
Yeah, so portfolio ke liye, it's important. Obviously, some people will be technical enough and say, ye meri website hai, is pe jaake dekh lo, which is fantastic.
LinkedIn की क्या importance है? वो कितना
important
है?
Yeah, very exceptional. A lot of importance. I would say at least within this field, if you have the right credentials, LinkedIn is very important. Like you constantly find people reaching out to you and the offering positions, this, that, the other. Like, I would definitely say depending on where you are in the world, LinkedIn is extremely important. I think Pakistan ke andar bhi abhi kafi jaake uska rujhan badhta ja raha hai. So that is where like having your own presence over there, obviously your personal brand, people talk about that, which is very important as well. But that's a good way to like get yourself out there. It's like, hey, I did this analysis, or I created this tool, try this out, Twitter pe dal do, LinkedIn pe dal do. See if it gets traction, get some feedback from actual people. And that's a good way, because nothing says that I can do this thing better than actually doing the thing.
Yeah. All right, so tell us about the most challenging project which you did, which still maybe haunts you.
Yeah, haunts to nahi hai, but it's something that I started off with, and I am still continuing to work on it. It's a bit of an interesting one, and sort of it ties back to some of the things that I mentioned, which is effectively leveraging large language models, which are things like ChatGPT is one of the large language models. Falcon is another one. Lambda is another one. Llama is another one. And how do we use these to create an intermediary where, let me take a step back. आप जब बाहर जा रहे होते हो अपने घर से या कोई भी चीज की सर्च कर रहे होते हो, when you think about it, it's a two-layered search process, 2 steps, right? You might go online and you might be like, I want to find restaurants near me. Okay? And then we'll list the restaurants ki. But then you will spend another 20 minutes synthesizing from those restaurants to then figure out based on your own personal preferences कि यार ये इसमें से कौन सा करना. So effectively आपका time फिर भी 20-25 मिनट लग रहे हैं उस काम के ऊपर. And this applies to like any other field. जिम ढूंढना है आपने, या फिर आपने किसी नए मुल्क में गए हुए हो, आप या किसी नए शहर में गए हुए हो, तो वहाँ आपको कोई XYZ चीज ढूंढनी है. So the hypothesis or the problem that I'm trying to solve in this instance is what if there was an AI agent, an LLM agent that knows you in and out, that knows your preferences, that knows कि यार इस बंदे को जो burger पसंद है वो उसके अंदर, he only likes fried chicken burgers, for instance, right? Or this, like within Chinese, this is what we prefer. So then it can run that activity, that search, collect that information and package it up in a form that's really easy for you to then actually just pick and say, okay, this is what I want. But the tonality or the way that they're doing it is no different from like, messaging a friend and asking for a recommendation. So then this thing then becomes like effectively like somebody that you can trust that knows you like your friend, your mom, your girlfriend, your wife, whatever, and can basically just synthesize that information in enough. So that's something that I'm working on right now, which I find is really interesting. And we've made some good progress on it as well. But अब वही है कि उसको productionize करना है और throw it out there in the world and see what happens.
Yeah, I want to add here that Saad bhai is also working on a few startups, or maybe he's associated with a few startups. But due to some privacy concerns, we won't really be able to talk about them at the moment over here.
Inshallah soon. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So one more thing I want to ask about basically machine learning.
Yep.
Usually कौन से machine learning algorithms हैं जो data set पे आप ज़्यादातर implement करते हैं? For example, linear regression हो गया, prediction models होते हैं, या regression models या फिर classification. Tell us about that.
I mean, that is effectively what I understand is that is most of them आपके वो decision trees होते हैं, आपके वो random forest किस्म की clustering होती है, आपके वो k nearest neighbor type के algorithm होती है, आपकी regression, linear regression. मेरा सबसे ज़्यादा the ones that I've worked with is mostly just multiple linear regression models.
Polynomial regression.
Polynomial regression. Effectively anything where like you have higher dimensionality data and you just want to figure out which of these can help predict this output the best. And normally that output tends to be, in my instances, numerical values. I haven't worked on a lot of classifiers at this point. What I will be sort of working on, or like what I find really interesting is the sort of stuff that makes these AI models take a little bit. Okay, उनके पीछे क्या tech क्या है? कि वो उसको data को vectorize वगैरह कैसे करते हैं, but that then it turns into a separate domain altogether. But I would say यही है. That's what I've worked on for the most bit. I wish I had more interesting things to add over here, but like that is seems to be most of the extent of my knowledge.
Right. So Saad, we will move towards the conclusion. बस एक दो questions और पूछूंगा आपसे.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
अच्छा, recently आप एक बंदा जो है वो graduate हुआ है in the year maybe 2025 or maybe 2024. ठीक है? तो आप क्या समझते हैं उसको अब क्या path लेना चाहिए if he is associated with these fields, AI, data science, etc.
Yeah, first things first, and this is just generally something that I would like. I think what you're doing is fantastic over here. What I would recommend is for a lot of Pakistanis to actually get into, because AI ka field is a big money maker in the coming future. Even as far as technical skills is concerned, in the interim, as far as I understand, a lot of people have been able to create software houses or tech ka kaam pakad ke kar rahe hain, and they're bringing good forex reserves. But from a competitive standpoint, the AI information or ability to actually get that information is insanely cheap. It's almost free. So दुनिया जहान के models अब मुफ्त में मिल रहे हैं, communities मिल रही हैं. So I think it's time where people should actually start looking into this stuff seriously. It might sound intimidating at the start, but it's actually not that intimidating when you actually start getting into it and getting into that field. So what I would recommend a fresh graduate at this point is to take this field very seriously. AI पे जरा जाके YouTube पे videos देखो, research करो. Use ChatGPT a little bit, try using their APIs if you can to sort of build something cool and interesting, and figure out like, generally is field ke andar kya ho raha hai. Then likewise, I'd say run some, like go to Kaggle, use their data sets to create some sort of action models, get some practical hands-on experience. The beauty of this field versus any other field is, right, yahan you don't need a big company or a lot of money to actually show that you can do the things that you can do. ठीक है?
For instance, portfolio अपना create कर सकते हैं for
बड़े मजे से. But it is, I think the only thing that's stopping people is the willingness to do it. This is not like आप doctor हो, आपको आप patient चाहिए, या dentist हो तो patient चाहिए, engineer हो कि आपको
data sets खुले पड़े हैं and you are free to
खुले पड़े में information. हर किसी ने YouTube पे कोड डाला हुआ है, मतलब तकरीबन मुफ्त की आपकी ये subscriptions मिल रही हैं आपको data camp की. Udemy, Coursera वगैरह की. So there's no actual excuse to not get into it, apart from the fact that it's just in my laziness है, या फिर you're just like you don't have your faith in yourself. So I would say go do that. That is the most important. That is going to make you step miles above anybody else who claims that they can do the things, but doesn't actually have the proof. So for instance, I'll give you an example. If I'm hiring somebody right now, and if I have a bunch of CVs that I have to look at, if somebody who actually has included their portfolio in there, they are much more likelier to actually get a call back, purely because they've had that information, versus somebody else who has a bunch of projects listed but doesn't necessarily have has certain skill sets. So that's one way to set yourself above that sort of talent. Yeah, and that's what I would recommend. Iske upar education or formal education will only get you very far, because normally this technology is growing much faster than formal education can actually keep up with it.
Exactly.
So आपकी university आपको basics जरूर समझा देगी, लेकिन बाद में it's entirely up to you. So that is where if I can stress anything about is कि इस field के अंदर specifically, this is not like history or sociology or psychology जिसके अंदर every 10 years there's some major change and whatever. This field is growing every day, and you need to actually keep up with it to be very competitive. So that's one. There's a pro, but there's also a con to this, depending on who you are.
Exactly. The next सवाल भी इससे relevant था, but you addressed it. वो basically ये था कि degrees और skill में लोग आजकल बड़ी एक ना debate चल रही होती है. तो I think आपने वो भी इसमें address कर ही ली है कि basic understanding के लिए और network के लिए basically degree शायद जरूरी हो.
Basic understanding के लिए जरूरी होती है, but that should not limit you. Like honestly, मेरा example है यार, मैं finance पढ़ी हुई है. I mean, that's my undergrad. Right, and then my master's was in information systems, but it wasn't purely focused on data as well. Like that was a subset of it, but it wasn't like a data science degree, which is much more dedicated to this sort of thing. Honestly, the degree will get you the baseline, but it will not get you where you need to be. There's this other fantastic YouTuber, his name is Nicholas Renault, who बैठ के AI models पे काम करता रहता है. I think उसका भी background ऐसे ही था, कहता था कि मुझे banker type का था. And now he's like hardcore programming, coding, and putting these things out there. So that should not limit you at all. This gives, within this field, it gives everybody a fantastic opportunity. Okay, anybody who wants to get into it, if you're a social sciences major, you want to get into it, great time. If you are, anything else at all, economics padhi bhi hai aapne marketing bhi padhi bhi hai, and you think you're slightly technical and you know what steps to get there, fantastic. There's no barriers to entry over here per se. It's not like law or doc. Aapko ek certification chahiye hoti hai. You don't need that here. And what I would say is it works better than posting your certifications on LinkedIn is actually, again, doing some projects and putting those projects up there. Because again, certifications can be barrier to entry. It's very low. And you see like a lot of people doing
certificates को भी आप इकट्ठे कर सकते हैं, but doing projects और I guess वो लगाना आप उसको ज़्यादा weightage दे रहे हैं.
Yeah. And I would actually recommend get to your listeners as well. If anybody wants to reach out to me as well and wants any help in terms of projects, any ideas, like data sets, I'm more than happy to have a chat with them. Or more detailed, idea. So I'm just going to leave my contact details with you, and you can share one of my email addresses out there.
Awesome.
But that's great. And honestly, that's the best way to do it. Secondly is obviously networking within the field as well. So reach out to people who are hiring. One thing that works well here, I don't know how well it works in Pakistan, is people here are very responsive. You just drop them a message on LinkedIn and say, I'm really interested in learning about your field. Would you like to grab a cup of coffee? या फिर किसी conference पे आप जाते हो, किसी से मिलते हो. So you just basically make sure you are putting yourself out there and having conversations with people. Because वो ये है कि घर बैठे बैठे किसी ने नहीं आपको आके कोई चीज देनी. But if you're out there, you're putting yourself out there, you're talking to people, you're expressing your interests, then inshallah things will work out for you.
Nice. So Masar Saad, you've covered everything in a very comprehensive manner, I think. So
I hope so. I feel like I rambled a lot, but yeah.
Last question आपसे ये पूछूंगा कि any plans on coming to Pakistan? We would love to invite you to our university as well for maybe a seminar or maybe a workshop.
No, I keep on coming very frequently. I was just here August में इधर ही था. I just actually flew back maybe 2 weeks ago. Inshallah, I'll be there in a couple more months. So I'll reach out to you. I'll let you know. And I'm happy to.
Let me know. We'll definitely invite you.
Yeah, no, happy to share the love and knowledge. One thing that I love about this field is and just generally the practitioners in it is that they're very sakhi hain apni knowledge ke saath. वो
अच्छा, अच्छा।
गार्ड नहीं करके बैठे हुए कि यार मुझे ये चीज़ पता है तो मैं किसी को नहीं बताऊँगा बिकॉज़ मेरा बिज़नेस सीक्रेट है। So, and within the same vein, I also like, I think that's generally a good principle whenever you're in education is कि यार मुफ्त में बांटो ताकि सारों को फायदा हो और इंशाल्लाह growth उसी तरह आती है. And in a country like Pakistan, we desperately need to grow faster, and better and smarter.
इंशाल्लाह. So thank you so much, Saad bhai. I hope आपको भी मजा आया. मुझे तो काफी मजा आया, and I've learned a lot as well.
I hope so. I felt like I rambled a little bit here and there, and I would definitely had long-winded answers. But I hope that you have some information out there that you can use. But yeah, I mean, apart from that, बताना यार किसी भी चीज़ की ज़रूरत पड़े तो let me know. Just anything.
Inshallah. Inshallah, Zarur. And we'll surely contact you when you come to Pakistan again. So thanks
Inshallah.
once again. Thank you once
Yeah.
again.
Thank you.
Till the
Ji.
next time.
Good
Allah Hafiz,
luck.
Saad bhai.
Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you so much.